I took the summer job at Blackwater Midway because I was desperate for money. The amusement park sat outside St. Louis, near a dead stretch of highway surrounded by empty fields and run-down gas stations. Even during the daytime, the place felt depressing. Half the rides were permanently closed, faded banners peeled off rusted poles, and most of the employees acted like they hated showing up. I worked at a small snack stand near the very back of the park beside an old spinning ride called the Cyclone. The thing looked ancient. Its yellow paint had faded almost white in places, and the entire structure groaned whenever it operated. Older workers joked that one day the ride was going to kill somebody. The scary part was how serious they sounded when they said it. That Thursday night, a storm rolled in around 6 in the evening. Rain hammered the midway so hard the pavement flooded in places, and families cleared out quickly once lightning started flashing over the park. By 7:30, almost every ride had been shut down early. At first, I overheard from other coworkers that there had been a minor injury due to some malfunctioning of a certain ride. But after 30 minutes, when the cops showed up and sealed the area with security tape, I knew something serious had happened. Most of the employees clocked out and left, but I was told to stay, clean up, and wait for a supervisor to escort me out, since the park didn't want hourly workers wandering alone near the accident scene. The farther back you went, the quieter everything became, until all you could hear was rain hitting metal rooftops and rides creaking in the wind. There's something deeply wrong about an empty amusement park at night. Without crowds and music, the place doesn't feel fun anymore. It just feels abandoned. The storm weakened into a drizzle. I was inside the snack stand scraping grease off the grill when I noticed someone standing outside the service window. The sight startled me because I hadn't heard anyone approach. The man stood completely motionless beneath the yellow lights, wearing a soap gray hoodie with the hood partially covering his face. Water dripped steadily from his sleeves onto the pavement. Then I noticed the blood across his hoodie, smeared across his chest and stomach. The stains looked dark and heavy even beneath the rain. I froze, thinking he'd been stabbed or caught in the accident. I stepped closer and asked if he needed help or if I should call security. When he looked up at me, I saw how pale his face was, almost gray under the lights. He quietly asked why everyone was pretending not to see him. At first I assumed he was in shock, but something about the way he spoke, so calm, so serious, unnerved me. I stayed behind the snack stand counter, keeping my distance, but the metallic smell of blood was strong. When I asked what happened, the man slowly turned toward the Cyclone. Rainwater dripped from the rusted bars while the wind made the ride groan softly. He explained that the ride malfunctioned earlier and trapped him after workers shut everything down. According to him, he screamed for help while employees evacuated, but nobody came back. Every instinct told me something was wrong. My stand was isolated, and security rarely checked this section unless called. I kept imagining him pulling a weapon or trying to force his way inside. Then he asked if I could hear something. At first, only the rain. Then, a metallic clang echoed at a close distance. A few seconds later, another clang, like someone banging on metal from underneath the ride. The man stared toward the ride that was sealed and quietly said that's what he'd heard while trapped. Panic started to creep in. I hurried to the radio and called security, reporting that an injured man was standing outside the snack stand, covered in blood. The dispatcher went silent for several seconds before another voice came on, asking me to describe the man again. When I mentioned the blood around his stomach, the radio abruptly clicked off. Confused and nervous, I glanced outside. The man was gone. My stomach dropped. There was no place he could have disappeared to so quickly, especially with the entire area taped off. Then, another metallic clang echoed from inside the Cyclone, much louder this time. Despite every instinct telling me not to, I grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the ride, careful to stay in sight of the nearest security camera. Rainwater dripped from the rusted structure, and the platform creaked beneath my shoes. The banging continued somewhere underneath the machinery. I climbed onto the operator platform and shone my light through the metal grating. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The beam settled on a crushed human hand, pinned beneath part of the ride. It looked swollen and gray, but I could see a silver ring on one finger, glinting in the light. The fingers twitched slightly, though later I would tell myself it was just the rain. Suddenly, footsteps splashed through puddles behind me. 3 security guards appeared, looking pale and tense. One immediately pulled me from the platform while the others shouted into radios. I tried to explain, but they cut me off. Finally, one older guard said there'd been an accident earlier. A guest had fallen beneath the ride during an emergency stop and was trapped. Management had shut down the area and was waiting for emergency crews, but hadn't told the whole staff to avoid panic. The description of the guest matched exactly with the man. I couldn't speak or move. They had to drag me away. I glanced back toward the midway. For one horrible second, I saw the man again, standing perfectly still beneath the flickering lights in his soaked gray hoodie, watching us silently. I blinked, and he was gone. That night, I couldn't help but think about the question he asked me. It's horrifying and tragic when I think about how the poor man's spirit was trapped there, not being able to decipher that he was dead. The reason no one could see or hear him was because not everyone can see dead people. I never stayed after close again. I stayed there for a year more and never saw that man again. But to this day, whenever I'm outside, probably returning home from work or a diner, I scan my surroundings with a heavy heart. And when I notice a street lamp on the sidewalk, I get a flashback of him standing under it, dripping with rainwater and blood, caught in the loop, whether he's alive or dead. When I took my 7-year-old daughter Emily to the Ashbury Fun Park, I had no idea it would be the scariest day of my life. The rabbit mascot was the first thing that caught my eye when we entered the amusement park. To keep the kids entertained, most of the mascots at county fairs acted very hyperbolically. For comic effect, they twirled and waved at passers-by and even pretended to trip and fall, but this particular one remained motionless, its large gray head slightly cocked to one side as it peered through the onlookers, as if it were searching for a particular individual. I gave it very little consideration when it happened. In any case, Emily saw it too, as she eagerly gestured toward the middle. She tugged on my sleeve and licked powdered sugar from her fingertips. The bunny beckoned to her with a slow-moving hand gesture. I could see the gap where she had recently lost one front tooth as she smiled so broadly and waved back. Seeing that smile made the whole journey worthwhile. She had a tough last year. Things between us were tense in ways I couldn't understand or resolve. Even after the custody agreement was completed and the divorce had dragged on for months, in my presence, she had grown more reserved. But as the day progressed, I could see my cheerful little butterfly being herself again. The bumper cars made her laugh. I despise heights, but she insisted I go on the big swings anyhow. After the employee allowed her to try the impossible shot 3 times in a row, she won a plush blue dolphin from a basketball game, which she proudly displayed. Things seemed to be running smoothly for a time. After that, the rabbit began to appear everywhere we went. It appeared to be a coincidence at first. However, I began to feel annoyance after the 4th or 5th occurrence. It seemed to be staring at us every time I caught sight of it. While Emily and I were having fries at a picnic table, I once saw it standing behind a food truck. On a separate occasion, as we emerged from a mirror maze, I found it close to the funhouse's entrance. It never talked to us, but I could feel unease all over my body whenever I saw him. Strangest of all, it appeared as though no one else had noticed. I attempted to ignore the sensation that was beginning to build up in my chest. Because there are so many reports of kidnappings and predators on the internet, I rationalized my fear by telling myself I was being paranoid. Actually, ever since I became a dad, my brain has been hardwired to always be on the lookout for danger. Nonetheless, the rabbit gave off an unsettling vibe. Emily wanted to take some pictures with the Ferris wheel, so I told her to sit by the bench that felt like a good spot with the Ferris wheel in the background. I was using a Polaroid, so the photos came out fast. I felt a knot in my gut when the printed images slipped out a few moments later. The rabbit mascot was also in the photographs. He was standing at a distance right next to the Ferris wheel. In that moment, I knew there was something very wrong with whoever was underneath that rabbit costume. I tucked the photo into my pocket after folding it. I was trying not to act out of character over something trivial that could have ruined the day. But ever since then, I'd been very conscious of my environment. I began to keep Emily close by my side. The vibe at the fairground shifted drastically as darkness descended. The park was getting crowded, and everyone was waiting for the fireworks show. To help Emily see through the ocean of heads, I lifted her on my shoulders. I vividly recall clinging to her legs as the sky above broke into a kaleidoscope of red and gold fireworks. I was finally enjoying the moment when my daughter asked me a question that drained the color from my face. She wanted to know if bunnies could find out people's addresses. She claimed the rabbit had approached her while I was picking up napkins from the food stall. I knew my instincts were right. So many questions flooded through my head. I forgot I was almost interrogating my little kid who barely understands danger out in the world, but I wanted to make sure how much Emily had shared with the guy. Within the next few minutes, I decided to leave for good with my daughter. I grabbed her hand and went straight to the main entrance. I began to feel more and more ashamed as we drew nearer. A part of me was aware that my questions sounded completely absurd. I felt ridiculous to be upset about a mascot at a county fair, but I couldn't ignore the uneasy sensation in my stomach. I went to the mascot who was sitting at the help desk and inquired about this creepy rabbit mascot. As I took my time explaining everything, the clerk at the counter listened attentively. She looked different the second I brought up the rabbit, though. She paused for a second, and then told me the fair doesn't have a rabbit mascot. For a while, I thought she was new or something, so I waited for another park employee to arrive and asked them the same thing. They were unanimous in their assertion. That year's fair featured just a brown bear and a pirate as mascots. With trembling hands, I showed them the photograph. They looked worried and confused at the same time. The help desk lady immediately reported about the guy roaming the grounds, disguising himself as a mascot of the park. I didn't wait to see what happened to him. I got in the car with Emily and started for home. We stopped at the first red light, and suddenly Emily screamed, "Look, Dad, look, it's him again." Right in front of my eyes, the man in the bunny costume crossed the road. He stopped right in front of my car for a quick second and waved at us, before disappearing into the darkness of the sidewalk. I was so horrified, not realizing how he managed to follow us by foot. The lights changed to green, and a loud honk from behind pulled me back to reality. I didn't mention any of these events to my ex-wife because she would have freaked out, but that night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. I never got to find out who that was, or why he was following us all the time. Since then, I've never gone to that same amusement park with my daughter again. In 2014, I was fired from my job, despite having a good college degree and an impressive track record. They called it a misunderstanding and said my reaction was unprofessional, so they let me go. I couldn't argue. They held all the power. From one of New York's top law firms, I fell straight to the streets of Louisiana. I left behind everything familiar and relocated to a small suburb, taking a job at a local amusement park, a place that was part water park, part county fair. I worked at a tiny toy store beside the so-called warehouse. My job was to stack shelves and manage the souvenir counter with Ursula, who filled the slow hours with celebrity gossip. I was quiet, keeping my past hidden, content to let her chatter fill the silence. She respected my background and probably wondered how I ended up there, but she never asked. I was getting comfortable around Ursula, but I couldn't stand her brother Josh. He worked security at the park, hired soon after Ursula spent a mysterious night in the owner's office. Ursula, clever in her way, knew Josh was desperate for my attention. One afternoon, while I rang up a customer's toys, Josh lingered nearby. When the customer left, he asked how I was, then if I'd go out with him. I told him no and focused on my work. He brushed his hand over mine and whispered that it didn't have to be serious, just a few hours of fun. And if I wanted more, I could always call. His audacity stunned me. I kept calm, smiled, and told him I knew what kind of person he was, but never thought he could be this cheap. That day, I took an early break, blaming a headache. Josh disappeared for a few days, but Ursula's behavior never changed. As summer arrived, the park filled with families, children running wild, the air thick with fried food and excitement. I didn't particularly like it, but I was finally adjusting. One morning, the owner called a staff meeting. This year, he wanted a 24-hour carnival with night shifts, food stalls, and fireworks. The pressure was on, but that day, sales jumped 40% by afternoon. By 7 p.m., everyone gathered for fireworks and I finally got a break. I slipped away to the restroom. While I washed my face, Ursula entered, complaining that she'd gotten her period and left her bag in the warehouse. She asked if I could fetch it for her since she couldn't go herself. I agreed and she locked herself in a stall to wait for me. I headed for the warehouse, feeling the festive crowd fade into the distance behind me. Something twisted in my gut, warning me to turn back. But Ursula was waiting, and I told myself not to be paranoid. Inside, the warehouse felt bigger than ever. 30 shelves, the back door far away. I flicked on the lights and walked to the left, where Ursula said her bag would be. It wasn't there. As I moved to another row, I felt someone duck behind a shelf. "I can see you," I called. Josh stepped out, blocking my way. His breathing was heavy, eyes red from alcohol, an empty beer bottle clutched in his hand. He screamed at me, called me a witch, and lunged forward. I didn't flinch. My hand went to the steel hair stick in my bun. That's when I broke my silence, my real confession, the truth even Ursula didn't know. You see, I wasn't fired just because of a misunderstanding. On my last day at the law firm, my boss tried to force himself on me, and I stabbed him in the eye with this very hair stick. He didn't press charges because I kept secret recordings of his harassment, proof that he traded promotions for sexual favors. He wanted it all buried, so the company paid me a hefty sum for my silence. I wasn't poor. I worked at the amusement park because it's easier to hide in a crowd, to disappear among strangers. Blending in is safer than running. As Josh came closer, all those memories returned. He stared, surprised by my calm. He asked me why I didn't look scared of him. I smiled, readying the hairpin. Just then, Ursula burst in. She apologized. Her bag was at the store after all. She saw Josh, screamed at him, and told him to leave me alone. After that, Josh avoided me. Ursula acted like nothing happened. I know she has her suspicions about my past life, but she's smart enough not to mess with me. As for Josh, if he ever tries anything again, I'll make sure he gets what he deserves, just like my previous boss.